I've played my first hunting game recently, and this is this is kind of like I wouldn't say a radical departure from what I normally play because I do play games that have hunting elements to it. It's just it's not as realistic as this game. Um, it's called uh, The Hunter Call of the Wild. Now, some people may not, some avid outdoorsmen and hunters, they probably would laugh at the fact that a game like The Hunter Call of the Wild would be even called realistic because some people would say that it's more arcadey. And yeah, I can see that, but actually I like that. I like the fact that it's not ultra realistic. It's realistic enough for sure, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. For someone who knows shit about like real hunting, real life hunting. I've never hunted before, although I'm very intrigued. But I think it's an easy transition from someone who plays traditional video games that have hunting elements like Red Dead Redemption 2 and games like that. Like from there to this game, Call of the Wild. I think it's a great transition, and maybe I don't know too many hunting titles besides the newest Way of the Hunter. I think it's a THQ Nordic game, which looks super intriguing, man. I'm thinking about pulling the trigger on that one soon, but I've got so much content to cover in Call of the Wild. Game came out like 5 years ago. I think it came out like 2017, and I just started it just a week or two ago. So I've got a shitload of content to catch up on, and so far I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's weird because it's a game that, once again, like I said before, it's something that I never thought I'd enjoy. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on with me, but it's like I've been having this shortness of breath issue recently. Um, so I may sound like I'm just like maybe like a little sick, stuffy nose, whatever. Um, I never would have thought that I'll play a game like this simply just because I'm not an outdoorsman, and I'm from the city. I'm from the East Coast, Philadelphia region. So I've always been like enamored with like nature and you know the flora and the fauna of places, and that's always been something I've enjoyed. But to actually go out there and pitch a tent in the wilderness and bring f- your own little items to start a campfire and camouflage and all this crazy shit and a loaded weapon, that's always. I just recently learned to shoot. And by recently I mean like maybe a good month ago I shot my first gun, and that was scary as fuck. I mean, it was very nerve wracking, but it also was rewarding, just like I expected. Because you know, not to get super philosophical, although this is a show about life and, in general, as well as video games, most difficult things help you grow. That's a fact. You know what I'm saying? Like that's getting out of your comfort zone nets the most rewards in your life. And those rewards can be like tangible, they can be money, they can be whatever the case may be, or they can be something more deeper. They can be spiritual, they can be emotional, you know. Doing some risky shit usually nets you something great, some sort of reward. Of course, when I say doing something risky, I mean that within like reasonable confines, right? Like you don't want to go out there and fucking, mountain climb with no equipment. Although people do crazy shit like that. Whatever, dude. I'm like, look, I get it. You want to get your rocks in, your rocks off. That's how the phrase goes. You want to get your jollies, and you want to get your adrenaline pumping and all that. But it's just, I feel like there's just a certain way that you should not you should. I gotta avoid that word because you can do whatever the fuck you want. You want to jump off a bridge. I don't recommend that, but that's what you want to do. How can I stop you? But I feel like some people just take it overboard, right? And that goes with anything in life, right? Like you show me a profession or you show me a hobby, and I will show you someone who has taken it overboard. You know what I mean? Like there's always those group of people. And I feel like those crazy ass mountain climbers that use no equipment, I feel like they're just going overboard, man. Like you're doing too much. Like slow it down, come back and live another day. You know what I mean? And it's sad when these people have families and stuff like that. And I guess you can even say the same about like motocross people. You know what I mean? Like I always thought that it was that's a dope little sport they got going. I think it's a sport. I'm not even sure, but that's something I'm not into, but I've always thought it was cool that, people are jumping giant dirt mounds with like dirt bikes and ATVs and such like that. But I seen people do that shit with no type of gear on, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude! Like, what are you doing? There's always that group of people that take it overboard. So this game is, I don't want to say a far cry from what I usually play, which is kind of ironic because it kind of does remind me of Far Cry in a lots of ways, in the sense that it's a big open world game with beautiful scenery and it's first person, and it's like gun oriented, but it's nothing like Far Cry. It's the action can be far and few between. There's times that I've played the game and I've spent 20, 30 minutes hunting for specific animals and I've caught nothing. Or I found it even worse and then I spooked it and it just ran off into the woods or whatever. Dude, the other day I did that shit and I've experienced a level of anger I haven't felt in like since I was a teen. I'm playing on keyboard and mouse. I literally bent down and was screaming at my mouse like it was my mouse's fault. Like I was trying to hurt my mouse's feelings. Like I like kind of almost gnawed at it. Like I did the mouth the mouth action of like trying to bite my mouse, and I was like, what am I doing, man? Like I'm so pissed off. I had to log out the game because I was so upset. I got up and I started pacing around the apartment. I was so mad, and I was like, "What the fuck?" I'm like, because in my mind, I'm like, first of all, I'm not used to these type of games, right? Like, you have to be extra patient to catch your prey, right? Now, I like the stalking aspect of it. You can hunt however you want. You've got lure hunting, which is like, you pretty much you stand on top of a tree or you build some sort of I think they're called blinds, some sort of a structure, and you pretty much, let out a call to attract does and deers, and then or you can scent, uh open up a bottle of some sort of scent. Usually it's like it smells like the urine of the animal, or it is made of actual urine, I believe, of the animal you're hunting, and you kind of just spread it all the way around like a little natural cologne all over like the grass or whatever, and then eventually the corresponding animal will come. I feel like, I don't know, man. Maybe I don't know shit about hunting, but that doesn't feel right to me. It feels kind of cheap, you know? Like I get a certain like thrill from tracking an animal and slowly stalking, and 10, 15, 20 minutes of me looking for this fucker, and then I finally catch him and hit that perfect shot, right? Which is another aspect I want to talk about, right? Cuz I'm speaking to my non savvy hunter friends out there because I'm a non savvy hunter guy. I don't know shit about this. I know more now because of this video game, because, like I said earlier, it is kind of semi realistic. So it does give you actual, like, background on an animal, actual background on, like, the geographic locations you're in. The guns, I don't think they're real, but they are modeled after actual brands and stuff like that. They're not actual brands, but they're modeled after them. And once again, I wouldn't know what an actual, like, I know some brands of guns, but I'm not like an aficionado or nothing, so I wouldn't know. But uh I like the stalking aspect to it. That's my favorite thing to do. And it could take, man, like I said, it could take anywhere from 5 minutes, 10 minutes to, half an hour, 40 minutes, depending. The harder, I think, the more legendary your prey is. I haven't really encountered. Actually, I have. I've encountered like albino deers or about an albino moose. I wasn't sure what kind of animal it was, but it was some sort of a elk-like creature or whatever, and it looked like all white. And I was like, oh shit, that's got to be like some rare shit. But I sucked at the time. I still suck now, even a week or two in. But I really sucked back then, so I was like, I don't even want to risk that. I'm just going to continue on the original track that I was in. Um, is it a game that I would recommend for everyone? No. I don't think I would. Not I like it. I like it a lot, and I can't as soon as I finish talking about it, I'm going to jump right on in and play for a while. I feel like it's a game that it's for, well, I can't just say certain people. That sounds too vague. This game is for people who already hunt and also play video games. You know what I mean? Like those two go hand in hand. You know what I mean? Because you can do what you love to do in real life, you can also do it virtually. Kind of like those people who actually play football and then come home and play virtual football on their PlayStation 5 or PC or whatever. I feel like these games are kind of tailor made for them. But of course, anyone can play. Even people who don't know shit about hunting. I've seen people on forums and on comments who are like me, who are from like the city. They know nothing about animals or hunting or of the like or survival, but yet they're intrigued. They find the game kind of difficult, but it's rewarding, and that's the important part, right? Because if you think about it, right, that what makes Dark Souls games so revered, right? Like people go ape shit for Dark Souls, right? Like Dark Souls is one of you would think Dark Souls was like in the Nintendo eShop that game never fucking goes on sale. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Not Dark Souls, Elden Ring. It's a Dark Souls like game. If I'm not mistaken, it's made by the same people, same developers or publishers, whatever. I haven't seen Elden Ring go on sale since its release, and I think it came out earlier this year, right? And it's like it reminds me of Nintendo eShop, right? Like those fucking Mario games, those Zelda games, them shits never go on sale. Like, you know what I mean? Them things would be out for like 3 years, and if they do go on sale, it's like a minor cut. Oh, it was originally $60, now it's 50 or 45, and you're like, that's not really too much of a deal. Game's been out for like 3, 4 years already. So, anyways, what makes a and I happen to like those games too. I never finished a Dark Souls, but I have finished Dark Souls like games, like Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, I believe that's a full title. I finished that. Honestly, I would say 99. I finished that game 99% because the last battle with the last boss, I believe, has 3 different phases, and I got to the third one after so much fighting, and he killed me, and I said, I can't keep doing this. I was just stressed out beyond belief, and I don't say that like loosely. I was so fucking mad, dude, and I just gave up, man. I ended up uninstalling Sekiro and then just watching the ending on YouTube. Right now, I have beaten Neo, or Nioh, Nioh, and the first one, not the second one. The first one, I've actually finished that from beginning to the end, and that game was. I still tell people till this day, Neo is the hardest game I've ever played in my life. Like I legit never stressed out as much as I stressed out when I played Neo. We're gonna call it Neo. I used to live in this apartment a few years ago, and there's probably still marks on it as we speak. I used to punch the drywall that was like right next to my fucking. It was right next to my right arm. Like it was. I had this small room, and there was just fucking dent marks on the wall from me just going ape shit from losing constantly on Neo. I have played many Dark Souls games before, Dark Souls like games. I've played Salt and Sanctuary, whatever. There's a whole bunch that I play, and I enjoy that formula. Although, to be honest with you, it gets very repetitive quickly. Like more or less. I can't speak for Elden Ring. I heard Elden Ring is a little more liberal in the sense that it's more open world, and it's you don't have to stick to the confines of following, going to certain regions in a certain sequence. You kind of could just do what you want, which it's intriguing to me, and I'm thinking about playing it. And I also hear there's a multiplayer element to it, but it's not implemented correctly. I don't know. I hear a bunch of things, but I maybe when it goes on sale, in within my lifetime, I'll pick it up. But that formula I'm a big fan of, although I do find it a little repetitive. The formula is more or less like this. It's like you encounter a boss, you get your ass handed to you several times, and then you beat the boss. And then you feel a sense of relief, right? A sense of accomplishment. Then you rinse and repeat that like 50 more times. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the same thing. You go meet a boss, get your ass handed to you. Eventually, you beat them. It's like delaying gratification as long as you can, and then finally achieving orgasm. Well, kind of. That's kind of like it is. Um, that formula is cool and all, but it gets repetitive. But the reason why I compare the formula, not the game. They're two different games, Dark Souls and Call of the Wild. One's a hunting game, one's a, fantasy difficult fucking game. But the formula is more or less the same because it is a hard game. Call of the Wild's hard. It's difficult in the sense of like there's a lot of tracking. There's a lot of disappointment when you track a particular animal for so long and then you end up losing them in the woods because you spooked them, you moved too fast, or the fucking wind, which you have no control of, by the way, happens to blow in their direction and they catch your scent and then they just take off and you're like, fuck, I was doing everything right, but this wind, which once again I am not in control of, just blew my cover. There's still some excitement to it. It keeps me coming back, and a lot of that I remember being stressed out and still just wanting to catch this particular deer. And the first thing I thought of was like, this game reminds me of like Dark Souls esque type games, and I like that about it. I like the fact that it is difficult and all that. But I also worry. I worry that it will become like Dark Souls in a sense that if I hunt bigger game, I would have to, track for longer, 40, 45 minutes until I finally catch it. Although lots of people out there who, would hopefully if they do hear this, they would probably defer, right? They would probably say something along the lines of, "Oh, well, if you get a scoped rifle, you can shoot a fucking bear from like 200-300 yards." And to me, at that point, I don't want to play a game like that because at that point, it is a shooting gallery, right? Because you're running around, just shooting things from a safe distance at all times. There's no difficulty to that. Now, is there fun to that? Yes, absolutely. It's like Duck Hunt. Remember the original Duck Hunt, right? Like you didn't have no realistic elements to Duck Hunt. There was no squatting, and you didn't have, the little duck caller or whatever you might call it, and you weren't out there for days crouching and freezing and starving, and you had to worry about scent. Duck Hunt was nothing. Duck Hunt was just like a bastardized version of hunting, right? Where it's just basically the best part, which is the ducks fly up and you shoot those fuckers. But it was entertaining. And essentially that's what it was. It was a shooting gallery. So I think that some people, depending on what their weapon loadout is in Call of the Wild, they essentially turn that game, Call of the Wild, into Duck Hunt. They turn it into a shooting gallery when they're running around with a modern, like military esque high powered rifle, and they're just shooting, like I said, bears. I've seen videos on YouTube of people just shoot bears from like 200 yards, 200 meters away. I think that's the proper measurement there. Um, it's it's cool enough. That's what you want to do. If that's how you end up getting your rocks off or whatever. And that's just a testament to the game because you can play however you like. If that's what you want to do, you want to essentially turn it into a arcadey or extra arcadey like gallery shooter. You can do that. You can just run around and just have fun, man. Just get rich. Just shoot shit from far away, harvest your ass off, and then just move on with life. But I feel like that shit takes away from the fun of the game. I think like after you do all the difficult missions and use weapons that you would normally have, like bows, right? I don't know how the community for Call of the Wild feels about bows, but I think they're pretty cool and they require a lot of skill because you have to be so close to the animal to get a perfect shot or whatever. At least that's what I'm assuming. I'm sure there's some crazy bastard out there who's shooting, prey from God knows how far away and actually killing them. But yeah, there's little elements like this about the game that I really like. And like I said earlier, you can play how you want. You can also hunt how you like. If you like, you want to get a tree stand and shoot them from a high angle, you can do that. If you want to lure and scent and use scents and draw them in and then kill them, you can do that. If you want to stalk them, you can do that. If you just want to run around and just have a relaxing day where you're just exploring you can turn it into a pure walking simulator if you like, which is pretty cool. It's cool that you can do what you like. It's your personal playground, and I can't wait to not only continue playing it, but also just checking out other titles like the Way of the Hunter, which is a new one that came out just a few months ago, about 2 3 months ago. That looks also interesting. Some people are saying that it's better, but people tend to say that shit when something new comes out. They kind of tend to jump on the bandwagon. But I also feel like some of them do mean it. They do feel like that game is a better game. The Way of the Hunter is better than Call of the Wild. But I wouldn't know. Like I said, I'm still in the beginning stages of Call of the Wild, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly. But to talk about the difficulty and the learning curve, yeah, it is pretty high. I wouldn't say like super high, but it's definitely a change of pace from what you would normally play, because it's not like if you expect to jump in this game and then just have, constant action happening every 5 minutes, deer to shoot every couple minutes, you'll be wrong. You have to be patient. You have to take your time. And some people ain't got time for that shit. Some people are just like, nope, I want to get in there and get action oriented as quick as I can. Especially gamers who tend to play, Call of Duties, Apex Legends, Overwatches, Destinies. Like those games, if you play Fortnites, if you play those type of games, no, you're not going to enjoy this. Although I still tell you to give it a try, man, if you want to expand your horizons. I know I did, and I ended up enjoying it, and I didn't think I was. I was just, you know, I listen to like certain podcasts and like Joe Rogan stuff. I listen to a lot of cool stuff. Andrew Huberman, I believe his name is. So many podcasts, man. All sorts. And they're always talking about hunting, and they're always talking about just the ups and downs of it, which I can totally see because, like, just yesterday I was just talking to myself while I was waiting around the subway, right, about the hunting um controversy. There's not a specific hunting controversy that I'm talking about, just hunting in general, right? It gets a bad rep, especially from city folk, right? And I can tell you that because I am city folk, and I'm trying to refrain from turning it into a political thing by saying the libs hate their guns while the Republicans do. Like I'm trying to avoid that and I'm trying to avoid gross generalizations, but I do believe that people, I can't say nowadays because it probably was always like this, but I would say that generally a person is reactionary in the sense that always errs on or errs on emotion. That was just a really long-winded way of me saying that I think generally speaking most people are more emotional than they are logical. Like they tend to react more on how they feel than how they think. Like or you know what I mean? Like what they feel just comes out right then and there instead of just sitting back and analyzing what they feel and going like, should I lash out? I feel like lashing out, but is that the right thing to do? So, how does this relate to hunting? I feel like when people see a picture of some smiling guy over the dead body of a buck or an elk or whatever, and they're holding it by the antlers and they're just so elated and there's blood, coming out of the wound of the animal they just killed, and the tongue is sticking out to the side of the dead animal. And people lose their shit when they see pictures like that. They're like, oh, how can you do that? How can you kill such a majestic, beautiful, natural animal? And once again, that comes from a lot of that. Not all the time. Some people are vegans and vegetarians. They're genuinely, sorry, concerned about animals' safeties, and you shouldn't kill animals for sport and things like that. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of that outpour of emotion comes from just being reactionary, just seeing a dead animal and just saying this is something deeply wrong about this, which I can understand. And any hunter who is defensive and goes, fuck those people, fuck, I hunt because I need to provide for my family, or if I kill a deer I can eat for like a year. And they're right about that. But at the same time, taking that stance, I can understand how they would be frustrated at these people who are not seeing the full picture. I can see that. But at the same time, people who are pro hunting need to understand anti hunting sentiments, right? They need to understand that you're seeing the picture of a dead animal that you're holding, like the carcass of an animal, and it's like, that's a graphic picture, and naturally your first instinct is to look at that and kind of cringe, or full on cringe, you know like, I used to be like that. I used to look at pictures of animals that are, shot the hell up, and I'm like, "Fuck, bro." But the thing is I've always been. I would like to think that I've always been a reasonable guy, and by reading, I haven't always acted reasonably. That's something different. I've done some crazy shit, and I've said some crazy shit. You know what I mean? And sometimes I was petty. Sometimes I don't always act reasonably, but I always try to act reasonably. I always try to be that person that be like, Danny, don't just go off what you feel right from the gate. Like, analyze your emotions. And I can see why there's a lot of anti-hunting sentiments, but at the same time, it's like, hunting invasive species. How would you explain that? Let's just say, right, magically, there was a law that's passed that says you no longer can hunt for meat, right? How will you eat meat? Would it be butchered? How would you even butcher it if you can't hunt it? Like, what I'm saying is, if you're one of those people who eat meat and also is anti-hunting, you need to fucking reevaluate your life. You need to really sit there and go, like, how did I get this burger in my mouth? Didn't grow from a tree. These people it's hard to have patience with these people. The people who eat meat but also are anti-hunting. It's like, bro, you can't have it both ways, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like, you get, like, I can understand someone who's vegan and vegetarian and is anti-hunting, sure, but someone who eats meat and is anti-hunting, it's like, bro, not unless you have a more ethical way of slaughtering animals, because obviously you want to continue eating meat. So unless you have an ethical way of somehow killing these animals and then harvesting their meat or whatever, then hey, man, by all means, let me know. I'm not an expert on this subject. I can see both ways, although I lean towards more pro hunting. I feel like, obviously, I'm playing a fucking hunting game, right? But my point is, it's like, I lean more towards, like, hey man, as long as you're not doing anything crazy, like always try to kill the animal as quick as you can. Try to give it the most painless death possible, which is something I also learned in the video game, right? Like, shot placement. Like, you want to hit it in the so-called, from what I read online, called the boiler room, which is like the lungs, the heart, that little section. Which, I always used to think like, oh, I knew you couldn't shoot it in the head because you could possibly ruin the antlers, but it's also not the most ethical way to kill a deer, right? You don't want to headshot a fucking deer, which makes sense, right? Although, you couldn't tell me that shit in Red Dead Redemption. I was fucking dead eye and moose in the eyeballs. But, I get it. But at the same time, it's like, you we need to eat, right? And if you don't eat meat, that's cool. That's fine. But you also have to understand that other people do, right? Which is that's another subject I kind of want to touch on really quickly. It's like, lots of people, and this is also people in general. I feel like just because one person doesn't do it, or one person feels like, oh, I don't do this, then no one should. Right? So, like, if you're a vegan and you're a vegetarian and you don't eat meat because it's a personal choice, that's great, but don't stop other people from eating meat. You know what I mean? Like those people, they anger me because it's like, okay, just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean that no one else should agree with it. Like, and then you've got the activists, you got PETA and all that, who are just like, don't do this with animals, don't do that with animals. And some of them are short sighted and some of them have really compelling arguments. So it gets a little, the waters get muddy, but there are clear cut things with the hunting controversy, like I said earlier. There are clear cut things that I would say that I don't like, and that's people who eat meat but are anti hunting. Like, I can't understand that. I just can't. Like I said, not unless you have a reasonable solution as to how you can continue eating meat without hunting or finding a new age experimental way of hunting, then I don't, it don't make sense to me. It's something that I don't even know the current state of. Like, I don't know if it's. I do know from what I heard in one of the podcasts recently, there's supposedly some particular species of bears or some other type of animals. They're protected even though they shouldn't be because they're invasive. So, like, when a species becomes invasive, to my understanding, once again, I'm not an expert in this, but when a species becomes invasive, it starts like fucking up the ecosystems of other species, right? And it kind of just starts to be the dominant species of that area. It just takes over, and you can't have that because other species need to contribute to this ecosystem. So you need to kill. You need to call like these specific type of invasive and numerous species. So it's like, if I hear supposedly there's certain bears that are becoming invasive, but the laws are protecting them because there's lots of people who have sentiments of anti-hunting, which that also becomes an issue in its own right, right? Like, it's like, okay, so you feel like we shouldn't hunt, so now you're implementing that into a law, and guess what? There's a bunch of bears killing everything. You know what I mean? Because no one's hunting them. So it's a slippery slope, man. Which is like, I hate to be that dude. Like, I'm usually not the guy to play devil's advocate. I love to see both sides, and lots of people may see that quality in me. They may say that, oh, that's bullshit, Dan. You do play devil's advocate a lot, but I wouldn't call it that, man. I would say I like to see the whole story. I don't like to just blindly follow you know, uh one person's story or one person's viewpoint. I like to be like, okay, if this person feels this way, what about this person? So I get the anti-hunting sentiments, but I get the pro-hunting sentiments, man. I feel like as long as you're doing it right and you're not hunting anything endangered and you're not just hunting for sport, you're not just killing shit and just wasting the meat. As long as you're being reasonable in your hunting, I feel like there shouldn't be any fucking problem, and I support that. However, I can also see how someone would be like, "Oh, I don't like it. It's pretty gory," and I just feel, yeah, I get it. I get that too. You're at the end of the day, you're taking a life. You know what I mean? And it's like that's something that it can weigh heavy on some people, and for some people, it's just that it's either I eat this deer or I die. But and that's also maybe another viewpoint that someone else would have. Is like, oh, we don't have to worry about that nowadays because we have Whole Foods and we have Acme's and ShopRites and Aldi's and Lidl's or whatever the hell you've got in your region of the world. Like, there were no supermarkets in the wild, man. There's no supermarkets in the wild. So it's like, to be self-sufficient, there's something attractive about that, right? There's something attractive about that person that has a cabin in the woods, and they're living off the land by growing their own crops and have their own little garden, and they're also hunting for their own meat. Like, there's something extremely attractive about that for me personally, and not only me. I definitely see many people talk about that, and that's something a lot of city folk talk about too. They're like, oh, I wish I had a cabin. And I'm just like, that's funny because, like, you say that until it comes time to shoot a deer, then suddenly you're like, oh no, fuck that, I want Beyond Burger, I want that fake meat. So it's a weird subject. It's a very weird subject, which I can understand both sides, but like I said, as long as you're doing shit properly, man, hunting should not be an issue. Shouldn't be an issue. Well, I guess playing video games is a great thing then, right? Because you don't have to actually kill a deer. You can run around and headshot deers if you feel like, you evil bastard. or you can kill them ethically and still, save some sort of digital dignity. You don't want your digital god to be upset at you. I recommend it, especially for someone who is kind of challenging themselves, right, in more ways than one. If you're someone who normally doesn't play these type of games, like me, for example, this is like I said, this game is only maybe about 2 weeks old so far in my library, my Steam library. So I never thought I'd end up playing it, but I am now keeping a sharp eye on hunting games and stuff like that. Like they're pretty fun, and I hope that this becomes like a staple. Hunting games become a staple in my game library, my ever-growing game library with hundreds of games that I have not finished. Although I try my hardest to always finish a game before I move on, and I do good for the most part. I would say the percentage of me finishing a game and moving on is much higher than the percentage of me not finishing a game and moving on. But there are times where I'm like, fuck this game, and then I move on to something new. Challenge yourself if you can. I picked it up for like $5, which was nothing. I think it's $20 right now, which is also pretty. I think it's a hell of a deal if you even get it for $20, because it's a big open world game with lots to do. It looks pretty fun. Sorry, it looks pretty fun. Like if I haven't just played it for fucking 70 hours already or whatever I have on record. But definitely, I would say strictly to challenge yourself, and then maybe if you do get it, kind of think about the Dark Souls elements that I'm talking about, like the difficulty. It's not exactly like Dark Souls in the sense of its direct mirror image difficulty, but it is a difficult game that requires some patience, just like Dark Souls. You know what I mean? Call of the Wild is a game that requires lots of time for you to delve in there in order to master. The difficulty is kind of medium high or whatever. So there are some similarities, lots of similarities, but it's a good game to kind of test your where you're at in life also. Like, oh, am I at the stage where I'm willing to try new shit, or am I going to enter a new stage where I'm just going to be that grumpy old man who's stuck in his ways and refuses to try anything new, and nothing was made better than the shit from the past. And I don't know. Yeah. See you later.